With a franchise as extensive and long-lasting as Megami Tensei, it's no surprise that over the years, the games have seen life on a variety of different platforms. Whether it's Nintendo, Sega, PlayStation, computer systems, or even flip phones, there's a safe bet that if you can name a system, you can probably play a Mega 10 game on it. So why the fuck does this scare me so bad? I mean, 9! We're still waiting for 5. And what the hell is this? A Shin Megami Tensei game on the Xbox. Yeah, this shit doesn't even look real, but it is, and it only gets weirder from here. Released in 2002, Shin Megami Tensei 9 follows the story of a virtual city known as the Idea Space, a digital recreation of Tokyo that quickly finds itself under attack by demons. 9 gets its name not because it's the 9th Shin Megami Tensei game, but because players are able to shift between 9 different alignments. In addition to the standard law, neutral, chaos alignment spectrum, 9 adds in light, neutral, and dark, making for a game with a variety of branching paths, alternate scenarios, and of course, different endings. One of the first games in the franchise to use 3D graphics, 9 was originally intended as an online multiplayer game, but due to development difficulties ended up being sold as a strictly single-player experience. The game was never brought outside of Japan, and like a handful of other Mega 10 games, has yet to receive a fan translation patch, a problem compounded by how unstable Xbox emulation can be. For the truly dedicated, there is an English script available for the true neutral route, one of the only sources of information on this game I could find that wasn't in Japanese. So, what's up with this game? What all does it bring to the table that we haven't seen before? Is it worth going back to as some kind of long-forgotten hidden gem? Well, as always, you know what we have to do. We're gonna take an in-depth look at a full playthrough of Shin Megami Tensei 9, checking out the game's plot, mechanics, music, bosses, and more, as we fight our way to the end of one of the most obscure games in the Megami Tensei franchise. Let's get started. From the main menu, as soon as you press New Game, you get taken to a character information screen where you can decide your name and gender. Pretty basic. You don't get to distribute any stats or take a personality quiz or anything like that, though your character's gender does heavily influence how the game plays out, as it changes dialogue and even other characters' roles in the story. For this playthrough, I'm just gonna play as a guy. After that, you wake up in a dingy, harshly lit room with your family looking at you. Tokyo's been hit by an ICBM, and this is the underground shelter we call home. Now, if that scenario sounds familiar to you, it's for good reason. This game starts during the first Shin Megami Tensei game, specifically the part where the heroes were warped to another world when the missiles dropped. After our mom here wakes us up, Emmy, our little sister, asks if we can go fetch an admission number for a new department store that'll be opening soon. This little conversation doesn't last long before our friend Baraki interrupts with a phone call, urging us to come to Shinjuku to check out a performance by the famous idol Urahime. So, the department store can wait. Let's go check this shit out. The dialogue ends and a computer screen in front of us opens up and starts talking. This is how we access the Idea Space. The real world has kinda gone to hell, so to make up for that, many people live out their lives in a digital world to pass the time. You're free to ask the computer AI a variety of questions if you want, most of which have horrifying answers. For example, it warns you of an increased presence of noise or bugs in the Idea Space software. If you couldn't figure it out, that means demons, and the computer's nice enough to let you know that if you die in the virtual world, your spirit probably won't return, and you'll turn into a lifeless husk known as a doll. Nice. Luckily, there are people known as debuggers who fight against the demons, and we'll be meeting a few of them before long. Let's hop in and take a look around. Right away, you're surrounded by a variety of shops and people walking around. I gotta say, I do like how a lot of these pre-rendered city environments look. Shinjuku is mostly plain, but as we progress to different areas of the city, you'll notice that they take advantage of different layouts, forms of lighting, and NPCs to portray a distinct feeling for each district. You'll also notice that you have a demon following you around. This is what the game calls a Navi, and it's essentially a partner demon that you can send off to gather information for you. You're able to use any demon you can find as a Navi, and they're all fully modeled and have their own animations. There's not much yet to do here in Shinjuku aside from going to the concert with Baraki, but let's take a look around anyway. Close to where we entered the Idea Space, there's a convenience store where you can buy medicine and other general use items. These shops appear in basically every area, so you can rely on these no matter where you are. There's also a little place called the Assault Cafe that'll sell us weapons, and across the city there's an armor shop. We've also got this flower shop with nothing in it. This is actually sort of a recurring theme throughout 9. Areas that usually have jack shit inside of them. It's kinda creepy at first. You can definitely tell that this was intended to be a multiplayer game, with a lot of these abandoned locations presumably designed for interaction with other players going entirely unused. If you're opting to play this game on an emulator, sometimes the creepy factor can be amplified by the weird-ass graphical glitches it goes through. The game is able to be completed on an emulator, but you are guaranteed to encounter some batshit crazy stuff, like getting stuck inside of walls, NPCs walking in impossible angles, and more. I'm sure these glitches will be ironed out with time, but be aware that you're gonna see some really strange shit. It's not something I'm gonna fault the game for since I'm emulating it, but keep it in mind if you decide to do the same. At least the music accompanying these areas is great. We're only just getting started, but a lot of the tunes you'll hear around town, in battles, and in shops really stand out and feature many remixes of songs from the first Shin Megami Tensei. Once you're done looking around, hit up the center of town, meet up with Baraki, and head to the concert. Everything starts off normal, but all of a sudden this giant fucking ball sack pops out of a screen like the girl from The Ring. It lands in the street and blows this guy the hell away, and before we have time to react, a lady in white summons demons, asks us to join her, and it's on. Our first battle. So, the battle system of 9. There's a lot to talk about with this. It's very different from essentially every Mega 10 game, and it's pretty unique amongst most JRPGs I've played. Immediately, what you're going to notice is that the battle starts playing out without any input from you whatsoever. Your demons automatically attack, you automatically attack, and on the other side of the battlefield, that lady from before is fighting with you with her own party. The first battle is a total cakewalk with only one demon to worry about fighting. Before you even realize what's going on, it'll play itself out and be over. This also tends to be the case with a lot of random encounters afterwards. The battles usually don't demand much involvement on your end. At any point during the battle, you're free to bring up a menu where you can issue different commands in real time. For example, you could order a demon to focus on healing, or just go all out with physical attack moves. You're also free to order the usage of specific spells and moves, but for most fights until the final hours of the game, it's really never that necessary. A particularly unique aspect of the battle system is combo attacks. In a Mega 10 game, if you want to heal your entire party, or attack the enemy party with an area of effect spell, what do you usually do? You learn a spell that hits multiple targets. Easy, right? Well, in 9, this really can't be done unless you use combo attacks. If you want to heal your entire party, then outside of using items, you're going to need 2 demons with the exact same healing spell to cast it at the same time. This morphs it into a party-wide spell instead of 2 single target spells. The same goes for attacks. 2 or more of the same attack being used at the same time will highly increase the damage and area of effect it encompasses. Interestingly, the power of these combo attacks doesn't really seem to be tied with the demon's level or how well your party is constructed. If you have 3 guys with the same attack, you're gonna wreck shit. If it sounds complicated or annoying, it's really not, but it definitely makes you change how you think about building up your team. Finally, as for the AI parties that sometimes join in on boss battles, you have no control over these, but they do provide you with support in the form of buffs and healing. Sometimes they're so good at it that you don't have to worry about doing either of those things yourself. Overall, while 9's battle system does have a handful of unique features, it usually ends up feeling pretty hands-off. Because demons are fully capable of performing regular and combo attacks on their own, and the AI parties do a decent job of helping you out, for most battles, you'll probably feel disconnected as you just watch things play out, occasionally jumping in to use a healing item. Of course, it wouldn't be a Shin Megami Tensei game without negotiation. This gets introduced a bit later on into the game, but let's take a look at it for just a minute so we can cover all of our core mechanics. When you trigger a random encounter, you'll have just a few seconds to decide what to do while a timer ticks down. You can fight, run, or talk. Your responses during negotiation in this game are timed, so when you finish reading what a demon's saying, you can't take too long to decide your response. If you can't read Japanese, well, you're kinda fucked. Take your best guess, and maybe you'll get lucky. The negotiations can go on for quite a while actually, and most questions have like 3 or 4 possible answers. It kinda reminds me of Devil Summoner, in that the negotiations have a fair amount of possible dialogues and goofy things you can say. If you played another Megami Tensei game, you pretty much already know what to expect, but that timer's either going to be something you think is neat or annoying as shit. At the end of every battle, you'll be rewarded with magnetite, or the energy used to summon and negotiate with demons, some money, and maybe an item. Did you notice I left something out? XP, right? Yeah, there is an XP in this game, and I'm being completely damn serious. Leveling up in 9 isn't technically related to how many battles you fight, but rather what jewels you have equipped. Different jewels you find throughout the game at shops and throughout the story allow you to build your character how you want by raising specific stats, increasing your level, allowing you to summon more demons at once, and equipping more items. Now that's some weird shit. It just seems strange to have a battle system in a JRPG without experience points. Theoretically, as long as you have money to buy different jewels as you progress throughout the game, there's not really a requirement to fight anybody. I mean, you'd probably still want to do some battles for money and magnetite to get through the game comfortably, but if you can manage to scrape by without it, that's perfectly doable too. It's honestly all pretty strange, because sometimes you just want to crank out a few fights and level up, but it doesn't exactly work like that, so it sort of changes how you think about level grinding and planning for bosses. If anything, you're going to want to trigger battles solely to recruit new demons, and then as soon as you have what you want, you can just run from every battle. I'm not exactly a fan of this system, but I can't say I really hate it either. They definitely tried something different with this game, but perhaps a bit too much for its own good, considering how Atlas never quite went back to a system like this. It's interesting, but not exactly satisfying. So, our first battle ends, and this lady, referred to as the Administration Woman, leaves us with a special Navi used by debuggers across the city. She also gifts us with some basic weapons and armor, and then leaves to take care of her injured friend, reminding us that the Central Administration Bureau will be keeping an eye on us. Alrighty then. After a quick phone call with our little sister, where we tell her absolutely nothing about what just happened, we join Baraki on a trip to Kichijoji to check out the new department store. From here, the city's a bit more open for exploration, and you're free to enter more shops. You can check out the Cathedral's shadows if you want to fuse your demons into stronger ones. There's a place where you can purchase magnetite if you run out, and of course, there are empty shops with literally nothing inside of them, not even a cashier. One of the cooler things you can do is visit a place called Ether Clover, where you're actually able to customize your character's race, hairstyle, and hair color. I appreciated this little touch because the game's protagonist starts off looking pretty plain and never speaks, so it gives you a chance to inject yourself into the world of 9, if that's something you really want to do. Over in Kichijoji, a bunch of people are standing around waiting for the department store to open up. Around back, Baraki is waiting in front of a path blocked by some kind of energy field. He's not exactly the kind of guy to wait around for things, so he decides on hacking through the force field. All of a sudden, the screen takes a shit and we're inside of what looks like a dollar store version of the Matrix. This is 9's hacking minigame, and it's really some shit. Make sure you're comfortable, go grab a snack, because it's about to get fucking wacky. Really, if I explained this to you exactly how the game did, it would probably take 15 or 20 minutes. Once Baraki starts talking, the man just doesn't stop. It's information overload, and even after reading over what he said a few times, it still didn't really click for me until I played it for a bit. So here we go. Hacking in this game isn't some cute little puzzle minigame where you flip a couple switches or guess a password or something. It's a real-time strategy game where you command units and order them to capture strategic points across the map, fighting enemy units along the way. The idea is that you can complete the hack by capturing the enemy's command area, which is a special space on the map, or by killing their lead unit. When you start the minigame, first, you choose how much magnetite you'd like to have on hand for the mission. If you can afford it, it's generally best to just go all in and bring everything you can. Then you select different ports across the map to spawn your units at, which consist of you and the demons you recruited. You're gonna want to pay attention to enemy movement, because if your command zone gets destroyed, you lose. So you might have to alternate between going on the offensive and defending. There are a wide variety of other spaces across the map, like recovery areas, trap areas, and production areas. You can build these yourself to support your team and slow down the enemy, and you're gonna want to destroy any enemy buildings you can. I mean, do you hear the shit I'm saying? It sounds like I'm talking about fucking StarCraft or Civilization or some shit. It's not your average minigame to say the least. It's more like a whole ass second game just stuck in here. To be honest, I found the whole explanation they give you to be sort of overcomplicated, because a lot of the time, you aren't really doing that much. It can be kind of fun when you're planning things out and you have a little momentum going as you conquer the map, but I don't know, it just feels like it could be better. Mostly, what you're doing is waiting and watching while your units are engaged in combat or tearing down enemy structures. Kinda like the battle system, as long as you're sorta competent at figuring out what to do, your involvement tends to be pretty minimal, and it's just not that exciting. You do have the option of actually warping down into these battles and controlling them directly, which can often resolve them quicker and save you resources, but until the latter half of the game where these missions get a bit harder, there's not much of a point. I can appreciate that 9 tries to experiment with different gameplay elements, but in my opinion, it would have been better off just focusing on one. Instead of one really engaging standard combat system or one really fun real-time strategy game, you get 2 different systems that both feel kinda mediocre. So, the first hack is pretty simple, and because Baraki directs you for most of it, you can't really screw up. Once it's over, you see some little girl run off down the newly opened path, when suddenly, this guy from the administration appears. You and Baraki run the hell out of there, but then you roll up on this girl again, cornered by a demon. It's just one weak little purple monkey thing, so the battle's another curb stomp. After everything settles, the girl tells us her name is Sumire, but the administration catches up again, and this time we've got nowhere to run. He decides to take us down to the administration building for a little talk. We arrive in some kind of big meeting room, and the man introduces himself as Mubiora and also shows us the bureau director, Suzumi. These two are the leaders of the Idea Space's debuggers. The conversation doesn't get far before another person enters, this time a woman named Ferris, the supervisor of the administration and apparently the creator of the Idea Space. Well, holy shit. She describes her intent to make great the Messians of old with the virtual city. That's definitely not something someone law-aligned would say, right? Needless to say, we're going to hear more about that later. After a bit of talking, the administration decides to offer us a place with the debuggers. Essentially, we're going to become the cyber police, responsible for fighting off demons and maintaining safety in the virtual world. Baraki seems a bit suspicious and cares more about what kind of payment he's going to get, but fuck it, let's take the job. It's better than doing errands for a sister at least, right? Speaking of our sister, after the meeting wraps up, we head home, and Emmy asks if we got the reference number for her. You know, the entire reason we left the house this morning. Well, I sure as hell didn't, Emmy, so sorry about that. She seems to take it pretty hard and asks if you hate her, but I don't really give a shit, because in the span of like 30 minutes, I became a demon-slaying, computer-hacking cyber cop with a white mohawk. With that, we've reached the end of the first chapter. Crazy shit, right? But believe me, it's only getting started. Chapter 2 starts off with orders to return to the administration building. Basically, it's going to be our first real day on the job. Back in the meeting room, Suzumi introduces us to a woman named Miranda. This is the lady that we fought our first demon with at the concert, and she's going to be our new partner. Suzumi emphasizes the importance of regular patrols across the Idea Space to take care of any roaming demons, and he hands us an amethyst, the first of many jewels we're going to collect in order to raise our level and stats. Be sure you equip this. You can have 3 equipped at one time, and depending on which ones you're using, you can choose to have a more magic, speed, or strength focused build. It also naturally allows you to recruit and fuse stronger demons. With that, the meeting ends and we head outside with Miranda. Mere seconds pass before she spots a demon out on the street, and she asks us to take care of it by negotiating with it. So, funny thing about this, the emulator took a shit on this part, so the demon itself, Sudama, is actually invisible on the screen here, but I am talking to it. It asks you a simple handful of questions, and if you get it right, it'll join you. So, you basically get a free demon if you can pull this off. Afterwards, Miranda says to continue your patrol elsewhere, and from here, you're free to roam around for a bit. During this downtime, you might want to buy some armor or weapons in preparation for what's coming up next. To advance the story, we need to go back to Kichijoji. Let's head up the nearest terminal in Shinjuku and warp there. Now, in case this wasn't clear, this game doesn't actually have a way for you to physically walk between the different areas of Tokyo. All travel is done by clicking where you want to go on these terminals, so there's not like an explorable map or anything like that outside of the city center areas. Back in Kichijoji, we see this fucked up, glitchy looking demon out on the street. After a really short negotiation that couldn't have lasted more than 5 seconds, it leaves, and things look generally peaceful. So, mission accomplished, I guess. That's literally all we can do today, so it's time to go back to the office. You're going to notice pretty fast in the early parts of the game that you backtrack to the meeting room a lot, with these little micro missions making up the first few hours of gameplay. Things really pick up story-wise later, but for now, we've just got to follow orders and get the job done. Suzumi gives us a little debriefing and awards us a handful of items, and then we're free to head home for the day. While we're chilling back home at the bomb shelter, Baraki gives us a call. He mentions that he's the only debugger in the neighborhood he lives in, and that he's been making so much money from the job that he's gonna move out. Okay, but hasn't it literally only been like a single day since we got this job? Anyway, Baraki also mentions a place in Ueno crawling with demons that might be worth checking out, and then he hangs up. What a guy. So after a quick rest, it's time to report back to the administration again for another mission. Suzumi explains that someone in Ikebukuro is calling for assistance with removing some demons and asks if you're up for the job. Interestingly, you have the choice of saying no. So for shits and giggles, I did, and believe it or not, they compliment you for being aware of your own weakness and allow you to go and perform your own patrols. So fuck it, let's go check out the Ueno Demon Pit instead. Ueno is actually probably my favorite district in the game, just because it looks dark and moody. You got the food stalls on the street, the big neon lights outside the convenience store. This shit just looks cool. The place we're looking for is this big garage door looking thing that leads to a series of underground tunnels. This is the dungeon Baraki was talking about. Except, well, maybe dungeon isn't quite the right word. I'm sure you've been wondering, when exactly does the dungeon crawling start in this game? Well, to be honest, it really doesn't. Yeah, outside of maybe 2 or 3 very brief parts of the game, there are absolutely no mandatory dungeons to be found. Instead, across Tokyo, such as right here in Ueno, you'll find these underground tunnels that you can explore where you'll encounter demons you can either recruit or battle for money. There is no treasure in these things, no puzzles whatsoever, no obstacles, nothing. Each one is about 20 floors deep, and every floor is almost the exact same, with the key difference being that the enemies get progressively stronger. It's better to think of these as training grounds, because their only purpose is for you to gather resources and then get the hell out. Even for the scant few story mandated dungeons, they're essentially the exact same. Long, empty corridors with absolutely nothing inside of them. If you were looking forward to exploration, well, you're gonna be disappointed, because outside of roaming the city streets, 9 doesn't have much of it. So when you come across one of these places, it's a good idea to grab a couple demons and remember where it is for later in case you get stuck and need to fuse something better. When you're done here, aside from checking out the shops and talking to people, there's really nothing to do except go back home. For some reason when you get there, Sumire, the little girl from before, calls you and says that she wants to play. Emmy asks who the fuck that was on the phone, but then Suzumi calls and says we got another job to do. So, you know the drill by now. It's back to the office again. Suzumi explains that a powerful hacker is currently active in the idea space, stealing customer data from a sex shop down the street. Obviously we can't allow people's kinks to be exposed to the public, so we gotta head down there and stop the guy. I really don't get paid enough for this shit, honestly. Before you head there, make sure you're good on demons and items, because this job is going to be a bit tougher than before. While we're on the subject, let's take a closer look at the Cathedral of Shadows for a second. So, the basics of demon fusion are generally the same as any other Mega 10 game. For starters, you can fuse 2 or 3 demons at a time to make a better one. Simple enough. Generally, you can fuse a demon that's up to 6 or 7 levels higher than you, but anything beyond that is going to require you to find more jewels or advance throughout the story. The Cathedral of Shadows also features a service called Compression. So in 9, each demon has a weight to it. I guess you can think of it as like a file size or something. As you level up, your weight limit increases, so you can have a higher number of powerful demons summoned at once. If you summon too many demons, or you have a few demons active that outlevel you, you're going to exceed your weight limit, and if that happens, you're fucked, so don't do it. If you go over your limit, you quite literally have 0 control over combat. The closer you get to your limit, you progressively lose more fighting ability. If you're just below the limit, for example, you might find that you're unable to use items. It's pretty strange, so you need to rely on compression, which cuts down how much weight your demons take up and allows you to fight more comfortably. Make a habit of doing this once you choose a nice, powerful demon, and you should be fine. Another function related to demons is the usage of microchips. Throughout the game, whether it's through beating bosses or random encounters or simply progressing, you're going to find a selection of chips that you can equip onto demons. Each demon can use one at a time, and they can do a whole lot of shit, from changing their strengths and weaknesses to teaching them new moves. One chip doubles a demon's health but cuts their magic in half, which is pretty great for a demon that relies on physical moves. If you're strategic with things like this, you can build some really strong demons with no weaknesses, so don't forget about this feature. Finally, there is no demonic compendium in this game, so whatever you use for fusion is gone for good until you go back to the tunnels and recruit another one. When you think you're ready and you have a solid team, head to the sex shop, and the next RTS mission begins. We gotta out-hack the hacker and save some fucking porn. For this mission, we have the help of Baraki, Miranda, and Mubiora, so once you pick your demons and spawn in, just focus on fighting whatever units you see and build whenever you can. The others tell you to focus on defense, so try to keep demons from getting too far into your territory and you should be fine. You're only really gonna have a problem if you're going in with an empty party. With your 3 AI partners all attacking at once, the battle's over pretty quickly. Back at base, Suzumi gives another debriefing, hands you another random pile of items, and another day on the job is complete. Not bad. At home, Miranda gives us a call and says she's impressed with our skills. She mentions that she used to live in the same neighborhood as you, but that she since has moved elsewhere. She also expresses interest at the idea of meeting you in the real world, but realizes that opportunities are pretty limited considering how dangerous the idea space has been getting. Sumire also gives us another call, letting us know that the mall opens up tomorrow and that she has a reference number she can give to us. The following morning, Emmy and Mom decide to head into the idea space for a bit, so with nothing else to do, we decide to go meet up with Sumire and Kichijoji. Funnily enough, Emmy and Mom happen to be in the same place, so the group talks a bit. Sumire seems pretty quiet and evasive about where her parents are when she gets asked, and quickly gets nervous and decides she wants to go home. Except all of fucking sudden, Jack Frost himself runs in and tells everyone that the mall is crawling with demons and to get the hell out as fast as possible. Well shit. Your family runs to safety, and Mubiora runs in with Baraki and Miranda as backup. Sumire's safety is still a priority, so the group loans her a demon to protect her until we make it out. At the end of a nearby road is our next boss. This is Typhon, and he can actually hit pretty hard. Be sure you're fully healed and you got some medicine on hand for this one before you start the fight. It's pretty simple if you can survive the first turn, but a handful of times he one-shotted me immediately, so just be sure you're as prepared as possible to get past it. After the fight's over, the group notices a guy named Hayashi lurking nearby, watching the fight. He asks if we're debuggers, but apparently gets freaked out and runs away, so we gotta give chase. After a bit of searching, it seems like he's gone, but in a nearby alley, Miranda says that she saw him enter the underground tunnels. Well, we look around a bit, but there ain't shit. Mubiora explains that Hayashi could have escaped by accessing an illegal terminal nearby, and then cut the connection once he made it through. Baraki seems surprised by this, as it implies there are other areas in the idea space that we don't have access to, or even other separate virtual worlds entirely. Mubiora decides he should contact the director soon to learn more about this. Back at the command center, Suzumi explains that the situation in the idea space is getting worse, with a high increase in disturbances. The group briefly discusses the idea that someone outside the idea space is tampering with it, but it doesn't get far, and everyone decides to head home. Sumire tells us that she had fun today, even though we almost kinda died, and then Mubiora calls and lets us know that Sumire has yet to return home. It seems he did a little bit of investigating on his own, and that apparently she lives in an exclusive residential area with extremely busy parents, so she must be unsupervised during much of the day. Mubiora urges us to let him know if Sumire contacts us again, and then he hangs up. So, rest for a bit, and then it's another day, another mission. Suzumi asks us to go and patrol near Roppongi, but you're again given the option of just patrolling wherever you want. So let's go somewhere else instead. How about Akihabara? Well, it certainly looks pretty cool, with shops and signs all over the place, and even a big arena that you can visit. You're not allowed to go in here just yet, but we'll be back here later, so keep it in mind. There's also a bar here that I checked out with literally nothing in it. I think it's kind of interesting the amount of detail that went into designing this room, with the decorations on the shelves and little individual items on the tables, only for it to get used maybe once throughout the entire game. You'd think if they put this much effort into the design of a simple, random room, they could have spruced up the optional dungeons a bit too, but oh well. I also decided to check out Shinagawa, a very obviously law-influenced section of the city. I guess the best way to describe this place might be clean. Like, everything looks nice and organized, and you got a big cathedral you can walk into. When you think you're done exploring, head back home again, have a little small talk with your friends on the phone, and then it's back to the office for yet another day on the job. Now don't worry, things are going to start picking up soon, so just hang in there for a bit longer. During this meeting, Suzumi tells us about a man going wild in Akihabara who's working with the same level of power as the administration, so he decides to send us and Miranda to take care of it. Baraki gets told to stay behind on this one, and he's pretty pissed off about it, but there's no time for arguing. Sure enough, in the middle of the Akihabara streets stands a man surrounded by bodies. Just as we're about to jump in and challenge him, Baraki shows back up, and though Miranda gets mad at him for not following orders, he joins the fight with us. Now this boss uses a Titan demon, so he's pretty strong physically. As always, be sure you're on top of fusion and equipment. I've used this evil turtle thing and it helped out a lot. Also, if you're getting wiped out on the first turn, be sure you place your character in the back row and all of your demons in the front. This can help you survive long enough for the AI party to support you with buffs and healing. When he finally goes down, Baraki gets rough with him, demanding answers for his behavior. Miranda starts going off about how he's a fucking loose cannon, and then all of a sudden starts pulling out personal details about Baraki's life, like how he's lashing out because he lost his father when he was a young kid and was raised by a stepdad with an iron fist. I mean, I don't think that's gonna calm him down, but go for it. Miranda explains that he always chooses to face his problems with violence, but Baraki tells her to shove that psychoanalytic shit up her ass. She tries to level with him by talking about how she lost her own parents, but it's no use, and Baraki leaves. Nice. At this point, you have the option of learning more about Miranda if you want, and she'll tell you a little bit about Mubiora too. Essentially, she had trouble coming to love the parents who adopted her, but eventually realized that they provided her with as good of a childhood as they were capable of. As for Mubiora, Miranda reveals that he hates his father, who is a nuclear weapons scientist. Anyway, back at base, Suzumi says that we successfully stopped Green Bear, which is apparently the name of that ruthless criminal we just slapped the shit out of. He hands you some items, and then it's the same old drill. Head home, get a couple of quick chats in with your friends, and it's back to work the next day. So, the next morning at the meeting room, that guy from the very start of the game that got blasted by the giant ball sack walks in. This is Sari, and it looks like he's completely healed. He and Miranda get paired back together, so now it's time for the boys to wreck shit as Baraki and I become a team once again. After this, you literally go back home again, and they get a phone call from Miranda, who explains that she just got assigned to a kidnapping case in the idea space. The kidnapped children have become lifeless dolls in the real world, and they need to act fast or they might be gone forever. Then that cheeky fuck Suzumi calls and he's like, hey, come back for another mission. So for the 3,000th time, we walk back to the office. This time, we're looking for a hacker who goes by the name Cheap Chip. He asks us to head to Shibuya in search of people that might be allied with him. Drop in, and Mubiora is waiting in a nearby alley. It's time for another RTS hacking mission. This is going to be our biggest one yet, but the same principles still apply. If you leave offense to Baraki and Mubiora, you should be fine, and the fight should resolve itself before too long. Be sure to focus on those enemy command zones and destroy any buildings you can to cut them off and reduce the amount of demons that spawn after. Keep it up and the hack goes smoothly. With this, the administration has enough info to capture Cheap Chip, so it's mission accomplished. As always, pick up your free shit, head home, and then return to the office for our next mission. Now, Suzumi has a lead on yet another hacker, a guy named Miura, hiding out in Akihabara. For this mission, we literally just gotta go there and talk to people to see if we can find any rumors. This is a good chance to use that feature where you can have your Navi gather information for you, so try it out. Eventually, you track the guy down to a building at the end of an alley, and he's laying inside on the floor seemingly dead. Baraki notices a computer right next to his body, and what do you know, it's time for yet another RTS hacking mission. Let's get this shit done. Well, for this one, it's just you and Baraki again, except the map is much bigger, so you've got a lot more ground to cover. You're going to need to keep an eye on where those demons are going. If you leave offense solely to Baraki here, there's a chance you could die, so you kind of need to play both roles depending on the situation. If demons reach your command area, you don't have much time before they destroy it and you fail, so you want to be sure you aren't overextending yourself and leaving your defense wide open. Build shit like crazy, and as always, bring as much magnetite as you can to fuel your demons. When you finish up, Miura seems to have regained consciousness, and for some reason, he meows at you? What the fuck? Yeah, I don't really get it, but he explains between meows that he wants to release the world from the restraints imposed by the administration. Baraki demands to know more about this, and Miura invites him to join his group and see the true nature of the world. He explains that the mastermind behind this group is a man named Goto, but that he's dead now, and that we can only learn more by joining. Baraki doesn't take this as an answer and decides to fight him instead, so it's time for a boss battle. There's a lot going on here, as Miura uses a handful of demons and Baraki joins in with you. It's really not that hard, just focus on taking out his front row and work your way to the back. Like most fights, as long as you can survive the first couple turns and you have decent demons, you'll be totally fine. Back at base, Suzumi scolds the shit out of us for killing the guy because now he can't be interrogated. Baraki tries to ask about what exactly he was talking about when he said that the administration was tyrannical, but this just makes Suzumi snap a bit, and he tells us to do our job and not ask questions. Well then. We head home and rest once again, and this brings us to the end of Chapter 2. Things are starting to look a little fishy with the administration, and from here, the game really starts to shift from being a job simulator to being a bit more of an adventure. Chapter 3 opens up with a meeting with the whole squad. Well, except for Miranda. It turns out she hasn't been seen in a few days, and nobody really seems to know where she went. Suzumi decides to assign us and Baraki to continue working on the kidnapped children case in her stead. Sari gives us a little bit of the information that he's gathered. It turns out he and Miranda discovered an operating system that was designed by a group called the Ring of Gaia. Baraki recognizes the name as the same group who opposed the Order of the Messiah. Sari says the deeper research into the group has revealed that they perform ritual sacrifices where the victims are taken to a place like hell and pledged to, quote, the devil. So, about those kidnapped children, you don't think they're sacrificing kids, right? Well, that's what we gotta find out. We get ordered to check out Akihabara again, and Baraki finds a suspicious-looking vending machine that's actually a terminal in disguise. Looks like it's time for another RTS mission. This is another simple one. In this mission, they introduce a mechanic where if you have certain varieties of demons that can fly, you can enter flight mode and move your units quicker, though they become more vulnerable to being ambushed. By now, you should probably have a feel for how these missions work, so just do your best and you should get through it just fine. After you beat the level, you end up in this weird pink wireframe room with a guy staying at a table. Baraki starts pressing him for information about getting closer to the Ring of Gaia, and the guy tells us that to access the operating system that Sari found, the password is, and wait for this, Goto. Really? I mean, they didn't guess that already? Whatever. Outside, a guy talks to us and says that he's looking for Ring of Gaia recruits to battle against the Order of Messiah. We move with him to a bar and have a little talk. The man explains that the noise disturbances that have been plaguing the idea space recently are in fact demons, so there's another big surprise. He urges us to join if we want to know more, and then leaves. I mean, really, today we didn't learn jack shit. The noise is demons and the password's Goto. I feel like the main character's mom could have figured that out, and she barely leaves that room in the underground bunker. So, after we report back, the group decides to send us and Baraki on an undercover mission instead of just arresting the people we talk to. Head home, and it's not long before Baraki contacts us. He has a Ring of Gaia man waiting for us at the site of Tokyo Tower in the real world, so instead of going to the idea space, we head up there instead. Our contact tells us that we need to bring, you guessed it, a child sacrifice if we want to enter the Ring of Gaia. That's all he's going to say to us, so we have no choice but to head home and talk about it. Baraki calls us back and says he's got an idea. Who's a girl we both know that has little supervision and has been involved in a handful of missions with us? Sumire, right? Yeah. Baraki's fucking idea is to bring Sumire to the real world and pretend to offer her up as a human sacrifice. And you know what? That's exactly what we end up doing. So we show back up at Tokyo Tower with Sumire, and she's all excited because she thinks we're gonna go out to play. You know, this is some pretty sick shit. So the man invites us to come with him, and we get warped into some other location out in the real world. This is the inside of a submarine, and the man explains that there's an entire separate underground city ruled by the Ring of Gaia, complete with its own version of the idea space, totally separate and disconnected from the one we've been exploring. He leads us into another room, and holy shit, Miranda's in there strapped to a chair. The man explains that he caught her recently sneaking around and uploaded her consciousness to the Ring of Gaia's virtual world. Following the man's lead, we all decide to dive in as a group. We pop into a nicely decorated room, and none other than Sari is in here, who explains that we've all been deceived and that this was all just a trap to kill us before we learn too much. You motherfucker. So it's time for a quick boss battle. For this, you gotta battle a handful of cultists, and then you can face Sari. It's a longer fight, so try to be sure you brought medicine or a healing spell with you if you can. They aren't super strong, so it's more like a brief endurance round, if anything. When everything settles, Mubiora appears and says that he's been following us too, and that most of Sari's accomplices have been arrested. He tells Baraki that using an actual child for this mission was a really dangerous idea, and that he should take Sumire home. Then, Mubiora invites us to come with him and rescue Miranda. Let's do this shit. Pass through a short tunnel, and you come out inside of the main Ring of Gaia city. A statue of Goto looms over the street, and a man explains that Goto is the one who opposed Thorman, an ambassador from the United States who was responsible for destroying Tokyo with an ICBM in an effort to halt the demon invasion. In the aftermath of the disaster, the Central Administration Bureau took power and began heavily censoring what was allowed inside of the Idea Space. Since the Idea Space is currently home to a significant portion of mankind and its desires, demons are attracted to it. The Ring of Gaia believes that coexistence with these demons is crucial, and as such, they send them to the Idea Space in an attempt to wake up its citizens from the tyrannical rule of the administration. Continue down the street, and we hear Miranda scream from somewhere nearby. We enter this weird, really dark sacrificial altar place, and Hayashi, that guy that was watching us on one of our first missions, shows up. We've got no choice but to blast our way through him and these other cultists if we want to save Miranda, so let's do it. Now, the boss fight itself isn't really that hard, unless you're playing on an emulator. This shit really sucks, and I hope by the time more people get around to playing this, it's an issue that's been patched out. So, one of the enemies you fight here uses an attack called Drive Shot. Nearly every time Drive Shot gets used, it straight up crashes the entire emulator. Like, it freezes for a second, and then the entire program closes. I have no idea how this works, why this specific move does that, but the fact is, your only shot of getting past it is to kill the boss really fast or just get fucking lucky and hope the move doesn't get used. I was convinced at this point for a while that I wouldn't be able to progress any further because I tried literally 10 or 12 times, but eventually, somehow, I ended up killing him. So it's possible, but it's a huge pain in the ass. The only way I could get it to work was to run the game at a lower resolution, and it seemed like that kinda helped for some reason, so for some of these clips, they're just gonna look worse than usual. Sorry about that. Anyway, the cultists go down and all of a sudden, the circle Miranda's laying in the middle of starts to light up. That doesn't look too good. Everything starts to dissolve and we decide to jump into the circle in an effort to save her. When we wake up, we're all in the middle of a rocky desert sort of place, with a city rising high into the background. Oh, and Cerberus is here too. Cerberus starts talking to us, wondering how humans managed to end up in the Expanse. Oh shit, we're in the Expanse now. He goes on to explain that this is no place for humans, and that we must have come in search of the woman in Gehenna, which would be Miranda. Cerberus tells us that he thinks we'll probably die here, and then he runs off. Nice. Well, let's take a look around. If you walk around a bit, you'll end up in a town where you can buy equipment, save your game, and talk to a few demons. So even though we're literally in hell, it's not that much different from being anywhere else. You'll also come across a dark, ornate-looking castle with a door you can pass through which leads to a dungeon. Holy shit, a mandatory dungeon? Yeah, I'm surprised too. I mean, it's like I said before, it's just a series of linear corridors, but hey, I'll take it over walking between my house and an office all day. Make your way to the bottom and you'll find Miranda chained up to a wall. We're just about to rescue her when the demon Moloch materializes in front of us. He doesn't have any allies, so the fight's a joke. Just keep your health topped off and it'll be over quick. When Miranda wakes up, she seems really worried about how the administration hid the existence of real demons from everyone and decides it'd be best to find a way out of here as fast as possible. Good idea. We head back to where we all landed in the Expanse, but there doesn't seem to be a way out. Our next best option is to check the town. On the walk there, we meet Cerberus again, who says that there's a gate across a massive canyon that could bring us home. Then he walks off. Yeah, thanks for the help. So in the middle of town, we're just minding our own business talking to people, when all of a sudden the demon Rakshasa comes in. He seems to not believe that we could have killed Moloch, the devourer of children, and challenges us to a fight. He's actually stronger than Moloch, but not by much, so don't worry too much about it. He just relies on physical attacks, so if you need to switch around your roads to avoid that, go for it. When the fight ends, he dies, and then outside we meet a woman in a dress named Abel. She says her husband can help us get across the canyon if that's what we really want, but that he's been cursed by a witch named Morgan. Alright, fine, we can take care of that. So head back to the castle, enter the door across from the one from last time, head through another quick corridor crawl, and it's time for our next boss. Morgan explains that she won't lift the curse because she's in love with Abel's husband, Caholen, so let's teach her a little lesson. She actually does have some fairly powerful moves that can take you out, so be sure you're coming into this at top condition. She's fairly fragile aside from a couple of strong attacks, so keep at it, order the manual use of your best magic if you need to, and she'll go down. After the fight, you have the option of sparing Morgan or finishing her off. I opted to spare, and what happens is basically, Caholen is all like, well, since you took my power, I realize I don't really need that shit. Morgan seems really touched by that, and decides that this is exactly why she loves him, so she breaks the curse. Isn't he married? Anyway, back outside, Morgan flies us across the canyon, and we're on our way. As you make your way down the path, it quickly turns to solid ice, and everyone notes a powerful aura coming off of it. Suddenly, this guy in black rushes in and says to stay away from this massive block of ice in front of us. He says that using the power of God, he sealed away a demon inside of it, but that it could still kill all of us in an instant. So, he's an angel. He introduces himself as Shiki and leads us towards the portal back home. Well, we finally made it. Jump through, and it's the end of chapter 3. Shit is definitely starting to pick up, and when we get back, things are gonna be a little different than before. Check it out. Back in Shinjuku, we get shat back out onto the street by this portal. Miranda tests the nearby terminal and notes that it's impossible for us to return to the real world for some reason. Weird. If you talk to some of the people on the street, they tell you about a new employee at the flower shop, and sure enough, if you head in, someone's finally there. All she really does is greet you and hand you an item called the Seed of Sophia, and says that it'll likely be very useful to us one day. Back outside, Mubiora notes that there's a lot of commotion up by the administration building. In the distance, you can see a crowd and some kind of structure, and if you really look closely, you can see a guy being crucified in front of it. Head up to the building, and there's a crowd there staring at nothing. Now this is another emulation glitch. You're supposed to be able to see the man hanging there, and as it turns out, it's not just any random guy, it's fucking Baraki. So he's supposed to be there, just take my word for it. The administration has decided to execute him for being tied to the Ring of Gaia. Except, wait a second. We were just on a secret mission, right? Well, apparently everyone forgot because all of a sudden, a group of strange men called Idea Angels swoop in and attack. It's a fight against 3 of them, and they use physical and gun attacks. You shouldn't have too much trouble here, and they should crumble pretty fast. After the fight, the group talks to Baraki as he catches his breath. You know, he looks pretty different. So here it comes. This is where the story starts to get a little interesting. Even though we were only in the Expanse for a couple hours, in the real world it's been 10 years. The reason we weren't able to leave the idea space at the terminal is because at this point, most people's real world bodies have been placed into a cryogenic sleep for some reason. Baraki heads through the terminal himself, unlocks our bodies, and invites us to step through. The group continues their conversation in a weird room filled with sleeping pods. This definitely isn't the bunker we used to live in. Baraki explains that only our consciousness was moved to the Expanse, and our bodies were left behind and moved to cold storage. While he's aged 10 years, we haven't aged a single day. Shit. He goes on to explain that we aren't even in the shelters anymore, but rather a facility at the bottom of the ocean called the Dragon's Palace. He urges us to look outside, and sure enough, we are underwater, but the remains of a destroyed city take the place of an ocean floor. Baraki says that 10 years ago, a huge flood took out Tokyo and flooded the underground city. Luckily, we just so happened to be on the submarine during our mission, so we lived. As if shit couldn't get any weirder, suddenly, a man called Steven enters, wearing a nice blue suit instead of his usual red one. Oh boy. Baraki says that Steven appeared through a terminal after the flood occurred, and that he claims to be a man from long ago that created a demon summoning program. He explains that the only place to go these days is the city above the water, known as True Tokyo, where the remains of the Central Administration Bureau hide out. Miranda expresses interest in exploring the city, and so the group decides to head topside and give it a look. From here, you're allowed to briefly visit a few areas of the city, but you can't really explore anything. It's basically just a visual novel segment. Miranda seems shocked by the clothes people wear, and notes that she's never breathed outside air before. Mubiora says that we should be cautious until we fully understand where we are. Finally, in the residential district, we meet someone else. It's Sumire, now fully grown since the last time we saw her. She's excited to see you and says that she's been hiding around since her family's looking for her. When everyone's satisfied, we warp back down into the submarine. Here, Sumire claims that nobody above ground seems to remember the underground shelters, and that since the flood, people have changed. Mubiora decides to pay the administration a visit in hopes of clearing things up. So, everyone heads out, except for Sumire, who stays behind to talk to us. She says that she saw her father enter a weird building in Ikebukuro in the idea space, and asks for our help in scoping the place out with her. Let's get back into the swing of things and head over. In the gloomy, neon-lit streets of Ikebukuro, we come across a building called L's. In order to get inside, we're gonna have to hack it. This is our first RTS mission that introduces trap spaces. These things can fuck you up if you aren't careful, and can either deal heavy damage, charm your team, turn them to stone, or maybe a combination of the three. Some demons have skills that can disarm these, and sometimes it seems like they just don't set themselves off when you walk over them. But you're going to want to keep an eye on your team's health while you're making your way through this. If you see a sudden drop, naturally you're going to want to use some items that restore health and fix status effects. If you're not careful, you can walk into a battle with half your party turned to stone or something, and then it's just a matter of time until you're dead. When you finish this hack, you and Sumire end up in some kind of club room with her dad lounging around surrounded by demons. He doesn't seem to recognize her, oddly, and then Sumire's mom walks in, who also doesn't remember her. They seem to believe that Sumire died years ago and that this couldn't be her. Pretty weird, but not as weird as things get when Sumire's mom starts flirting with you, and then her father starts to make an advance on her. What the fuck? So, needless to say, we both run out of the room, and we end up in an underground tunnel. Make your way through 10 exciting floors of nearly identical corridors, and you end up in the manager's office, who actually turns out to be a succubus. Somehow, this demon has been controlling a club in Ikebukuro to harvest people's horny energy, so we gotta take her out and give people some post-nut clarity. Succubus is fairly challenging and can hit pretty hard. Hopefully you've recruited some demons in those long corridors we just passed through, because you might want to have some backup summons in case things go wrong. She's also capable of inflicting some status effects like sleep, so keep an eye out for that. When she goes down, Sumire thanks us, and that's the end of Chapter 4. Well shit, that was pretty fast. Chapter 5 opens back up in the Dragon Palace, with Miranda talking about something called a life ghost. They're essentially humans that only exist in the virtual world and have no real-world counterpart. As she's talking about this, a news broadcast comes on which mentions increased incidents of the Ring of Gaia trying to hack the administration. Then we get a call from Baraki. He wants to meet at a coffee shop in Akihabara for a quick chat. Sure, for old time's sake, let's head over. We arrive to a full bar, complete with one of those scrotum demons hanging up near the ceiling. Baraki introduces us to a man named Naito from the Ring of Gaia, who mentions that they've been researching the administration and that they plan to use the idea space to somehow create or control the Messiah. The two explain their plan to hack into a nearby construction site and bomb the place. Alright. I mean, I guess you gotta start somewhere. The idea is that it'll draw attention to the ring and gather new recruits, so the two decide to start now, asking if you'll join them. I'm gonna be real with you, Baraki. We're friends, but I don't think I'm gonna bomb any construction sites today. You do have the option of going along with it, of course, but I didn't, so I'm just gonna head out now. Back at base, Steven appears again and talks about how the virtual space was created as a way for humans to vent their desires, and that the virtual world is itself an embodiment of true human desire. After this, Miranda asks Sumire to show around Ikebukuro to learn more about what life ghosts are, so we end up heading back there. But things don't go that smoothly. Miranda tries to ask some people on the street a couple of questions, but they get pissed off because we look like we're from the administration, and what ensues is a massive street fight against a whole onslaught of people. It's actually really easy, and it kind of feels wrong, because we're just slapping around innocent people in the street. But I guess we don't have much of a choice. When the fighting comes to a stop, suddenly Shiki from the Expanse pops in. He hands us a disc he found from the Ring of Gaia and says we can probably find some useful information on it. Thanks. Then it's back to the Dragon Palace again. On the news, they're all talking about a huge terrorist attack with 27 dead and 52 injured. And yes, that's Baraki's fault. Well, for now, there's nothing we can do about it, though that is pretty bad, so let's hack into this disc Shiki gave us. During this mission, Sumire explains a mechanic called terrain synchronization, where demons that use different varieties of elemental magic can somehow become aligned with the map and deal extra damage. I didn't really understand this, and I never ended up suffering for not using it, so you can try to figure that out if you want, but it's not a huge deal. This map is yet another pretty easy one, so just treat it like the rest and burn through it. With the disc cracked open, we learn about a place in Roppongi called the Information Store, and also a fighting arena in Akihabara. Remember that shit? I told you we'd be back there later. Miranda thinks fighting in arena battles is barbaric and stupid, but hey, look who you're talking to. Let's go check that shit out. When you show up, the guys out front are massive dickheads, and for some reason they try to fight you. Beat their asses and we can head on in. The first thing you see is Baraki himself up on stage fighting some guy, and he's yelling all this shit about the Ring of Gaia and going kinda crazy. Oh, Baraki. After that, the game cuts to backstage, and we're getting ready for our first fight. Okay, well, you better get ready. So, here's how it goes. Beat your opponent, move on to the next round. Win 5 matches in a row, and you'll become the champion and even win a surprise sword. Lose, and well, you die, so don't lose. Now, you have the option of quitting after any of the fights as long as you win, so becoming the champion is just an optional thing. Let's see what we can do. Our first opponent is a guy called Maximin, who supposedly has strong fire attacks. He dies in like 2 hits, so whatever. After that, you've got Hell Nurse, who is also very easy. You know, we kinda have a knack for this sort of thing. After that, you got a guy called Fezu Adonis. A little bit tougher, but still, nothing you can't handle if you've gotten this far. Next, there's a guy called Bootsy, who is so strong, he can crash the entire fucking game. Yeah, you didn't forget about Drive Shot, right? Well, this guy has Drive Shot, and if he uses it, your shit's crashed, which means you gotta go all the way back, reload your save, and start the arena fights from the very beginning. Listen, I tried. I really did. I gave it like 4 or 5 runs, but he just would not stop crashing my game, so I guess Bootsy wins this one. We made over 10,000 Maka, and even won a half-decent sword, and while it isn't the grand prize, well, I don't care. At least I have my dignity. Later on, Miranda updates us on what she found in Roppongi. Apparently, by dissipating human desire in the virtual world, people in the real world are also better off. It's kinda weird, but I guess it makes sense as to why the administration would want to control the idea space so much. Better virtual world, better real world. Things seem like they're starting to become a little more clear, but suddenly on the news an announcement plays. At Shinagawa Cathedral tomorrow, the High Goddess Maria is going to become a reality and visit the Loyal Messians. Oh shit. With that, we're done with Chapter 5. Well, we're up to Shinagawa and we're shown a creepy cutscene. Maria materializes in the cathedral in front of a huge crowd, and then her eyes start bleeding and everyone sitting in the audience fucking melts. What? We're left in the cathedral alone, and Baraki calls telling us to look at what's going on up in the real world. Then we get another weird cutscene, this one for some reason not animated at all, and also drawn slightly differently than every other cutscene in the game. Anyway, these people out in the street just fall over and disintegrate into skeletons. It happens a good few times in a handful of different locations, and then Baraki says that we're the only ones remaining in the entire idea space. What the hell's going on? Before we have much time to think, Suzumi walks in, flanked by idea angels. He says that with our deaths, the world will finally be cleansed, and things will be ready for the 1,000-year kingdom to be born. We can't just give up now. It's time for another boss battle. The angels put up a decent fight, and Suzumi has a pretty high pool of health. Basically, they're just sponges because they don't hit very hard, and if you've been keeping up with your demons and everything, it's gonna be pretty easy. There's honestly not much advice I can give you for a lot of these fights, unless they have a particular gimmick or they're one of the few that require an actual strategy near the end. There aren't any elemental weaknesses you can really exploit or anything like that. Just keep hammering away and these guys will go down soon enough. After you win, Baraki says that we all need to meet back in the Dragon Palace. There, he and Naito are waiting. Miranda takes a moment to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that whole thing about, oh you know, Baraki being responsible for the deaths of dozens of people. Well, he admits to it, but says revolutions are built on sacrifice. They keep trying to get us to join up, but nobody really seems comfortable with it. During the end of the conversation, Baraki pulls out a fucking severed head from his pocket. This is Suzumi's head, by the way. Apparently he was a robot, which means conveniently we can hack into his brain and see what he knows. Nice. So, it's time for another RTS mission. This one's a bit different, and you'll be facing a lot of idea angels. The background looks different than the usual green, too. Bring in as much magnetite as you can, like always, and you might want to consider adding in a couple of extra parties of your own to command if you have any extra demons. The more squads you're commanding, the more ground you can cover, and it'll minimize the time wasted on fighting wave after wave of angels. It's only you and Baraki, and he can get overwhelmed if you're not keeping him in top condition. If that happens, it's all on you to do both attack and defense, which is pretty much impossible. Finish the hack, and we end up in another one of those weird-ass wireframe rooms. Baraki sees what he refers to as strange letters on the computer in front of him, and he's talking about Hebrew, which, if you recall, was on the wall of the cathedral behind Maria when she popped into existence there. Back at base, Miranda confirms that the letters spelled Miriam, which is apparently Maria in Hebrew. Cool. So, the head of Suzumi is connected to the cathedral somehow. It's anyone's guess, except, well, we don't get to talk very long before shit goes bad again. Red lights start flashing, the computer starts yelling at us, and an outside view shows a huge explosion. It looks like the administration has finally tracked us down, and they just blew our shit up, bringing us to the end of Chapter 6. The next chapter immediately opens with the group in a different location. We're in some kind of base created by Steven. Guess he really came in clutch for us there. He shows us another video of the city above the water, and everyone somehow is back alive again? Baraki gets really pissed off because none of this shit makes sense, and he storms out. While Baraki's out trying to calm down, we join Miranda on a trip back to the cathedral to investigate it further. Inside, there's a bunch of bodies laying around, and in the back is a priest being confronted by a familiar face. It's our good old pal Hayashi, still dragging around that giant red sack with him. Some things never change, I guess. As we confront him, he seems like he's gonna take the priest out, so you have the option of either letting him do it, or fighting him. For old time's sake, we should just beat his ass again, right? Well, if only it were so simple. For players using real hardware, you'll probably have an easy time with this one. Hayashi does have some powerful magic that you'll need to watch out for, because it can one-shot you if your HP isn't topped off, but he also has that game-ending move Drive Shot. This part sucks ass if you're on an emulator, really. Again, I don't hold this against the game, because it's not technically a part of it, but it's worth knowing about if you decide to take the emulation route like I did. It all comes down to luck or being overpowered if you want to get past this. That's literally my only advice. Good luck. I hope it's not as bad for you as it was for me. I actually died a handful of times in this part, and during the ensuing frustration, realized you could change your character's clothes at the armor shop. Check out this cool fucking jacket. That's some pretty sick shit. Anyway, when you beat Hayashi, he runs off, and the priest confirms that Maria, the temple, and the administration are in fact all linked, and that the administration controls everything. Well, that's nice. I feel like it was kinda obvious though, right? I mean, they were crucifying people in the streets and talking about the true goddess Maria earlier. Anyway, we head back outside, and none other than fucking Emmy shows up? You remember having a sister, right? Hell yeah, except the weird part is, she's still a kid. We don't get to catch up for very long before more idea angels show up. Take them out, and even more show up with another Suzumi? This Suzumi says that there are many, many copies of him in existence, and that we might as well just give up now because we can't fight forever. This game's really on some fucking crack. So, we retreat back into the cathedral. The priest shows us some kind of secret escape route behind the altar, and we take it, but not before the idea angels cap him and he falls backwards onto the floor in slow motion. We manage to seal off this secret room, and Miranda tells Emmy where we're hiding out. Emmy manages to use the terminal in the room to escape, and then we're left to fight waves of angels that spawn in the room with us. After the fighting finally comes to a close, we have to finish off our escape by playing another one of those damn RTS missions. Okay, so listen, if you die on this thing, it's all the way back to the beginning of the chapter. There are no saves anywhere in the middle of this whole disaster, so please, take my advice, don't die. You'll hate yourself if you do. Unfortunately, this RTS mission is by far the hardest one yet, and you're gonna have to be on top of your game if you want to make it past. This was the one that started to do me in. It made me want to rip out my small intestine through my ear and skip rope with it. I died like 3 or 4 times on this part, and that means I had to gamble my luck with Hayashi's emulator crashing bullshit over and over just to get back here. It really sucks, but I did it, so you can too. Check it out. As soon as you spawn in this thing, you've got a big map to deal with, and angels come out fast. You're going to want to use as many parties as you can manage. It's possible to do it with just one, but really, just save yourself the headache and bring more than that. If you're tied up playing defense, that means you're just wasting time while other enemies infiltrate your zone behind your back. Miranda isn't really great at helping you out on this kind of thing, so she tends to just run around in circles for some reason. I don't know, don't always count on her to save your ass. You might just want to directly order her to attack key enemy points and then just hang back, because if you leave the defense to her, you're probably going to lose, unless you're really fast at reaching the enemy's main base. It's a long mission, and if you let your guard down or slip up and let an angel past, odds are you're going to lose. So stay diligent, be careful, and again, don't die. When you finally get past this part, Sumire calls and tells you to head over to a bar called Alto in Shinjuku, and fast. This is essentially what you could call the first point of no return. When you walk into the bar, the first alignment lock is going to happen, so make sure you're ready before you go in there. You know, for a game where the title itself is a reference to alignments, I haven't really talked about them that much. To be honest, it doesn't really have that much bearing on gameplay most of the time. Aside from affecting what demons you can summon, like law-aligned heroes can summon chaos demons and vice versa, it doesn't really seem to change much aside from the battle theme, which is pretty cool. There are at least 5 different battle themes, and they're all great. But yeah, this is where your alignment starts to matter, and from here on out, it's going to have a much deeper effect on the story, affecting who lives, who dies, and who will be there for you during the final boss. When you get to Shinjuku, you see Baraki up on a huge screen, which I think is actually the same one that Demon popped out of at the very start of the game. He starts going off about how one of the administration's leaders is a robot, and promptly shows his decapitated head on live television. He pleads with the people of the Idea of Space to open their eyes and realize that they were the ones behind the strange killings in the cathedral, and the weird death and subsequent rebirth of people in the real world. Soon enough, Baraki gets cut off, and we need to go meet with him in person. Depending on what your alignment is, this scene can play out a handful of different ways. At this point, I was going for true neutral, but I actually ended up being on the lighter side of law. Miranda and Baraki talk about the broadcast he just did, and then Miranda starts to ask about Hayashi, that punk dude we keep running into. Then, Naito comes in and explains that the entire time he was hired by the Ring of Gaia to do their bidding and also investigate Maria. At this point, you potentially have the choice of agreeing with Baraki in the Ring of Gaia or siding with Maria. Since I was already law-aligned, the game chose for me, and I was forced to go back with Miranda and Sumire. Now don't worry, if this happens to you, there's still plenty of time to change your alignment if you don't like it. To be honest though, I kinda ended up feeling for Sumire, who isn't exactly law-aligned herself, but still isn't the right shade of chaos for the Ring of Gaia, if that makes sense. I was interested in seeing where things go from here, and boy does it get fucky. So Baraki tells you to go shove it up your ass and he kicks you out. Back at base, Sumire and Miranda show you some kind of data that they recovered from that hack we did back at the cathedral, in which a cutscene of Maria plays with the number 307 circling around her body infinitely. The group debates what this code might mean, when suddenly Emmy walks in. Sumire introduces herself, which is kinda odd since at the beginning of the game they're around the same age. Everyone has a bit more small talk, and I guess it's kinda heartwarming in a sense that just for a second, the drama of this game gets forgotten about and everyone just kinda chills out. After this, we get a call where a computer voice tells us to visit a place called Hell's Door in Ueno. So sure, why not? Drop in, and next to the old underground tunnel, there's a nice new entrance guarded by a Ring of Gaia member. Inside is, well, Baraki. Long time no see? He talks about how he's all powered up now because he's been borrowing energy from Cerberus and challenges us to a friendly battle. Not as enemies, but just as a kind of like, I want to beat your ass now to prove that you're wrong sort of thing. Well, let me tell you, this part right here, this shit sucks. The boss fight against Baraki isn't too bad on its own, though for you emulator players, it can crash a lot if you're unlucky. Baraki is mostly reliant on gun attacks and some magic, and his demon buddy can hit you with some hard-hitting spells too. If you got demons that can do combo attacks and they're half decent, this fight's pretty much a cakewalk since you're only dealing with 2 targets. What comes after is way worse. Baraki gives in, runs off, and Cerberus joins you, which is nice by the way. But then you head back to base and get tossed in what is undoubtedly the worst RTS mission of the entire game, and you can't even save between them. This mission is really something. As soon as you spawn, Idea Angels make a 500 mph world record breaking sprint to the deepest parts of your territory. If you aren't rolling with some flight demons, you can't catch these guys, and your only choice is to hope that they don't destroy all your shit and give you a game over before you can get there. I tried making parties with less demons, thinking that maybe if you loaded a team up with strong guys you'd move slow, but nah. Get some flight demons. I swear, it'll make it a lot easier. The angels are just fast as hell, and relentless with their spawning. Even after destroying most of the enemy command zones with Sumire, they just keep coming, endlessly. If you lose Sumire, or you end up in a situation where it's just you, you're screwed. There's almost no way to get yourself out of defending once you've allowed yourself to get pushed back that far, because the flood of angels just never stops. Make damn sure that Sumire and your other parties don't die, or it's over. You can try to copy the enemy's strategy and rush deep into their zone if you want to get it over faster. It sounds kinda dumb, like you might die from doing this or leaving yourself wide open, but it seems like the best strategy sometimes. This shit probably took me like 5 hours to beat if you count every retry. It just sucks. When you finally beat this part, you can rest easy, because from here on, the RTS missions aren't so bad. In fact, there's only like 1 left. Nice. So, you end up in a room with a terminal with Sumire, and you need to enter that code that you saw floating around Maria, 307. After this, you get another cutscene where the screen flashes an infinity symbol in the text since 2029. The group gathers that the software must have been running since the year 2029, which was the same year as the Great Flood. Then the screen begins talking about something called the Messiah program, but that's all we can really decipher. We can find out more of course, but naturally it's going to take time. After this, well, you don't have to worry about what comes next for long, because the game answers that pretty quickly. We get an emergency transmission from Shiki who says that the great demon Abaddon is attacking Shibuya, and that shit's really going bad. Well, who better to help stop it than us, right? Fuck it, let's go. But not before I save the game. Be sure you do that first to avoid any headaches. Drop in, and Shiki stands in the streets saying that the administration has totally failed to contain Abaddon. Then you're treated to a nice cutscene where he takes a bite out of a building like a Wendy's hamburger. Shiki leads us towards a large terminal and explains that it's possible to fight Abaddon through this as his power somehow flows through it. A copy of Suzumi also offers to help you in a temporary truce, so hey, let's get it on. Well, this is our last RTS mission. Thank God. It also happens to be one of the more enjoyable ones. You got a pretty cool team on this one, because in addition to you and your demon parties, you got Sumire, as well as a squad filled with Idea Angels. The demons here are pretty easy, though they can give you some nasty status effects, and there are a lot of trap tiles. Make your way to the bottom of this nasty looking place, and eventually you're confronted with the big man himself. I made good ol' Suzumi fight this one, and the resulting battle lasted over 99 turns if the two inflicted maddeningly low amounts of damage onto each other for like 20 minutes straight. Good stuff. This wet fucking fart of a battle was a great send-off for my tactical career in Shin Megami Tensei 9. So, Abaddon finally goes down and then melts everywhere, and the day is saved. Suzumi's laying down in the street weakened, and Sumire sees this as an opportunity to kill his ass, which is kind of a dick move, but whatever. Let's go for it, the guy's pretty evil, right? Well, Shiki stops us, and then Emi runs in. Shiki asks if she just came from inside of a nearby building, to which she says that she was hiding out there during the attack. He promptly turns around and says that building is full of life ghosts and urges us to follow him inside. Okay? This is the Shibuya 109 building, basically the penultimate dungeon, and it's by far the most involved because get this, you gotta reach the bottom and then go through a door, and then you gotta walk all the way back up the other side. Crazy, I know. Closest thing this game has to a puzzle. On a door on the second floor, Sumire spots that same symbol from the Maria video from earlier. Inside are a bunch of fucking pods with people stored inside of them. Now I don't know, I could be translating this shit wrong, but what it seems like they're doing is using these pods to suck human desire out of people, and then they ship it off somewhere. You have the option of smashing the capsules, which I happily oblige because this shit's just weird. After you're done wrecking the place, Mubiora walks in and says that we're about to understand everything and that we should follow him. Okay, yeah, sure, that'd be nice. You end up entering this huge-ass monitoring room, and Ferris, the president of the administration, is there with Emmy. Alright, so, you ready? This is where they really dump it on you. They show you a video of thousands of capsules floating around with energy being pulled out of each of them. Sumire seems really disgusted at this, as Mubiora explains that it's a human factory, a facility that exists in the real world, and that each person was created from the same genetic material. He goes on to say that since the flood, mankind has gone totally extinct, and the only ones who survived were those in the Dragon Palace. So, us. Ferris says that they found a way to revive humanity by harvesting human desire from life ghosts and compressing it into objects known as desire discs, which are then sent to a factory to somehow manufacture people. Also, Mubiora and Ferris are also machines. Okay. So as for what Maria is, Ferris explains that a radical sect split off from the Order of the Messiah, and that with the help of a scientist, they were able to create a god that would lead humanity, instead of, I guess, waiting for the real one to help them. Emmy starts flipping her shit because, well, I guess when you're a child and you hear that you aren't real anymore, that doesn't feel too good. I mean, humanity did go extinct, like they said, so she's just like a memory of the machine or something. She doesn't have a human body, so the simulation just kind of produces some sort of memory of her, which I guess would explain why she hasn't aged at all. Mubiora says that it'll all be okay as they reset the memories of everyone above ground on a regular basis, because if everyone knew about this, well, there'd be a lot of problems. This next part's actually pretty fucked up. Upon having this revelation that your sister, well, isn't your sister, you actually have the option to kill her on the spot, though if you take it, your character falls to the ground in pain. I mean, okay, imagine being told you aren't fucking real, even though, like, you're clearly alive, living. Does it even really matter if you're not a person, if you're still alive from your own perspective? Or is it really the right call to just put these kind of people out of their misery and spare them the torture of this weird human manufacturing, energy-sucking shit? I don't know, man, my head kinda hurts after this one. This shit's sorta crazy. Suddenly, the group gets a call, finally breaking the tension of this scene. The administration is under attack by the Ring of Gaia, and they're taking heavy losses. Mubiora and Ferris rush out, and with little other choice, we fall behind them. Inside a nearby room is good old Hayashi, who plans to take a desire disc and change things for himself. He throws that shit right at you, and outside a huge-ass tornado envelops the city, followed by a massive demonic hand coming out of the ground. Oh boy. And that's the end of Chapter 8. I guess 7 ended somewhere along the way too, but who's keeping track? Well, what follows is Chapter 9, the final stretch of the game, offering some of the best, most engaging fights of the entire experience. Let's finish this shit. The chapter immediately opens up with a boss fight against Hayashi, who still uses those same sack demons, so he's pretty simple. It's a pretty low stakes fight since the chapter literally starts off with it, so no sweat, just give it your best and you'll be fine. When Hayashi goes down, the demon Lucifuge materializes, and it's right on to another boss battle. He's also not too hard, but you don't get a chance to recover between the fights, so be sure you come in here with a revive spell or some kind of revival items. Sounds like common sense, I know, but if you forget, you've actually got to face quite a few bosses before you're given another chance to buy items or more equipment, and it can get difficult if you get narrowed down to just one demon, which is what happened to me. If I can beat the next few bosses though with just one demon, so can you, so don't worry too much about it. After killing Lucifuge, you encounter Emmy out in a hallway who looks really disoriented. She's carrying a weapon and she seems to ask, "Big brother, if you die, will I die too?" Then she swings at you only for your character to push her back and cause her to melt into the floor. Holy shit, our child sister just died, or at least the weird simulation memory version of her did. Mubiora tries to make you feel better by saying, hey, it's alright, she'll be back in the 1,000-Year Kingdom, but really, that feels like an empty promise, so he can suck my nuts. At this point, shit's way out the window, and all we can do is keep going. Not long after, we run into Baraki in a long hallway, and Miranda links up with the group. Mubiora runs ahead to take care of things, and unfortunately, we got no choice but to face Baraki if we want to get past. Last time, it was a friendly challenge, but this time, whether we like it or not, we aren't on his side, and he doesn't see any other way to settle it than through a fight. Baraki unleashes his full power and transforms into a stronger looking, half-demonic version of himself. Looks tough, right? You think it's gonna be some good shit, like two best friends battling it out in one good, long, fair fight? Well, it's not really like that. In fact, it's a little biased in your favor. Baraki's moves actually decrease his own HP, so much so that by the time you survive like 4 or 5 of his attacks, he's almost dead. With minimal effort and a fucking monkey as my backup, I beat this guy, no sweat. With a full party, I can only imagine how easy it is. And with that, it's farewell to Baraki. I gotta say, he might not have always chosen the right way to settle his problems, but deep down, the guy just wanted to create change and get people to stand up for themselves, and I can respect that. Afterwards, we catch up with Mubiora, who's, well, dying. With his dying breath, he hands us his desire disc, only for Naito to reveal himself in the room and reveal his identity as the angel Ragel. Ferris also walks in, and a long conversation starts about how it's Ragel's duty to monitor humans and angels in secret, and admits that it's best to restart humanity as the weight of its sin is too much for God to bear. Ferris ends up getting zapped, and naturally, Ragel doesn't want us to use the desire disc to change the world, so we've got another fight on our hands. It seemed like this guy had a lot of health to burn through, but I did have to beat him with just my character because all my demons were dead. With your AI party as backup, it's not as hard as it sounds. It sounds like pointless, lame advice, but really, just hit him. He'll die. There's no tricks, nothing to look out for, you don't even really have to try that hard. Just keep an eye on your health and pop an item if things get too low. When he goes down, Shiki comes in and reveals his true identity as the angel Sariel. He speaks of Lucifer and hints that he can be awoken with the desire disc, urging us to find a nearby terminal and meet all together for one final discussion. Head to the bottom of the dungeon again, be sure to save your game, and hit the warp. We're really close to the end now. Everyone that's still alive meets up on a city rooftop, and Sariel explains that the demon lord Lucifer can be freed to defeat Maria and finally set the world free from the administration. With its main supporters dead and the truth of their plan in our hands, we can use the desire disc to finish things off once and for all. Sumire seems to be on board with this plan, as Sariel makes a promise of a better, freer world. Miranda disagrees entirely, saying that without Maria's power and guidance, all of the manufactured humans would be dead within a year. Sariel invites the group to look down at the world below them, and you're shown an oddly uncomfortable cutscene where a ton of people get cut down in the street by demons as they all fight to escape through one extremely crowded terminal. I guess this world's pretty damn messed up, but it's not beyond salvation. From here, you get a choice. Join your now grown childhood friend Sumire in an effort to revive Lucifer and set everyone free from the administration, or side with your former partner Miranda and place humanity's hopes in the goddess Maria, who promises to create a peaceful world of order and purity. To be honest, it's kind of a tough call, with each having their own benefits. If Miranda wasn't just bluffing about the whole dead in 1 year thing, well, setting humanity free could just mean it dies out. On the other hand, are we really alive if we're having our thoughts and actions controlled by the administration? After a minute of thinking, I eventually decided on Sumire, marking the first time I've actually played a Chaos route in a Megami Tensei game. Usually I go for neutral, though on a couple occasions I've tilted towards law. In this game, if I'm being honest, I don't really see how you could make out law to be the right choice, especially when you have the option of choosing a version of Chaos that doesn't side with the murderous ring of Gaia. So we gotta wrap up one last loose end before we get started with Lucifer. Miranda. She actually seems pretty tore up about the fact that you didn't choose her, and it's kinda sad. She solemnly decides to fight you, her former teammate, as her back is literally against the wall since nobody else on this roof wants to go along with her. Her fight is pretty brief, though she does have a very powerful ice attack that can one-shot you if you're not ready. Set your character to defend, whip out your best attacks, and use healing when you need it. The fight should be over before too long, and then it's just you and Sumire. Whew, okay, we're almost there. Our next move is to find a way to the Expanse. Sounds easy enough since Sariel has the desire disc. Hop back in the terminal, warp back to the city, and Sariel's dead. Fuck. After you pick up the disc, shit only gets worse as Maria herself materializes in front of you. She doesn't really say anything other than she wants to bring peace to this world, and well, we're in the way. So here we go, the Law Lady herself. Well, this is one fight that's actually, well, fun? It's a bit challenging and actually sort of demands that you use manual commands. You're going to need to prepare for this fight, bringing demons with a Megiddo line of skills to spam almighty attacks on her. The more you have with the same move, the better, because that shit stacks and you can really wear down her HP. Pretty much all of Maria's attacks hit the entire party, so anything you can get to heal and offset that is great. As you fight her, she summons demons to help her, some of which can really do some damage, like Yamata no Orochi, who gets to attack like 3 times in a row and can weaken your front row to the point that Maria might finish them off. One cool feature of this fight is that the more you attack Maria, the more she starts to fall apart. Literally, like pieces of armor and shit fall off of her. Also, while this battle is fun, it really looks like shit. You're just out in some black void with a weird foggy floor, and Maria's like transparent. If you look at her from a distance, it kinda just looks like a mess of polygons, but hey, it's a fun fight at least. Keep at it, and if you're worried about your protagonist dying, just remember, defend the whole time and your demons should be able to carry you. When you defeat Maria, you get a choice of either leaving her there or finishing her off for good. I played this part a couple of times, and they both seem to do the same thing, which is melt her, but I opted to finish her off because why go through all that effort to beat her if you're not going to commit to it? After that, you step into the portal that lies before you and re-enter the Expanse. You remember the icy part, right? With the huge block that Sariel said not to touch? Yeah, that was Lucifer. You throw the desire disc at the block, and out comes the good old morning star, who is looking surprisingly bright today. He asks your name and offers to join you. Interestingly, you have the choice of saying no, but screw that, I came all this way for a reason, and we're gonna ask for his help. He says that it's time to sever our bond with the god of this world and finally attain true freedom. With that, he warps you to the final dungeon of the game, Paradise. You ready? We're finally at the end of 9. I mean, shit, it's kinda crazy we made it this far. It's been a long journey, and it hasn't always been that easy to understand, but hey, it's been interesting to say the least. Let's finish it up. Move ahead and you're immediately confronted by Adam and Eve, 2 enemies that will spawn repeatedly as long as you wander around in here. They drop beads which fully restore your party's health, so if you're low on those you might consider grinding out encounters for a bit. When you're done, walk down the hallway and that's the end of the dungeon. 09. Face to face with a giant door, Lucifer calls upon us to overcome one last obstacle blocking us from freedom. He urges you to confront your destiny and finally break free of the shackles that have been holding us back the entire time. Step in, and there he is, the final boss of the game, Yaldabaoth. He claims that the continued existence of humanity is just another sin, and that all of human history is marked by greed, crime, and guilt. None of this can be atoned for, except through death and damnation. He says that humanity's had its run, but it failed miserably and orders you to die. Then, it's on. The picture zooms out and a haunting final boss theme starts to play. It's time to finish this game. Yaldabaoth is a lot like Maria in that you need to use manual commands here. Almighty attacks are again the answer, and you need to be using your best shit constantly. MP restoratives are a must, because with the firepower you're going to be slinging around, you'll drain your magic reserves fast. Healing can sometimes be taken care of by Sumire, assuming you're playing this route, but just to be safe, have some beads or somas ready. The worst feeling in the world is relying on an AI heal, only for it to buff you or something instead. Like the Maria fight, if your protagonist is taking heavy damage, just hold back on them and defend, letting your demons do the work. A demon can always be revived, but you can't, and you don't want to lose when you're this far in, or you gotta go back and fight Maria all over again. Keep at it, and slowly but surely, Yaldabaoth's health wears down. As his health gets lower, he slowly shifts from being golden and statue-like to a more demonic, twisted-looking form. When you finally get his health down to 0, his head pops off, and it's time for part 2. A cool-ass remix of the Shin Megami Tensei 1 battle theme starts, and the last phase of the final boss is on. It's the same as before, except this time he attacks more and it hurts more. Make sure your demons have upwards of 600 health, because on a good turn, he can hit you for close to that much. At this point, I just straight up defend on the protagonist and never look back. Pop beads and somas like they're going out of style, because after this, you're done. It's a last-ditch effort for both you and the boss, as you each throw out everything you have. Be smart, be patient, always remember to heal, and soon enough, Yaldabaoth is gone for good. The screen fades to black, and you get a flashback of a handful of key events throughout the story. Lucifer appears again and says that the god of law has been eliminated. Humanity can finally begin anew in a land of chaos, and opportunity can grow. He warns you that freedom and control are always pitted against each other, and that they breed one another, with each having its own time to shine in the light or drown in the shadows. Then he flies away, and you drop back into Shinjuku in the idea space. The city is empty. The only thing left to do is leave and reclaim the world. Outside, you stand with Sumire, who says that while we're all finally free to do whatever we want, the one place she wants to be is with you. She asks where you'd like to go together, and the game ends. That's Shin Megami Tensei 9. So, what do you think about all that? For years, before I had ever dreamed of playing 9, I had heard over and over that this game was awful, never worth playing, let alone even bothering to emulate. Well, they might have had a point with that last one, but you know what? The game isn't great, but it's not terrible either. The plot, while sometimes confusing, genuinely interested me, especially near the latter half of the game. It's nowhere near the series' best writing, not by a long shot, but it is an interesting side story that, if presented with better, more fun game mechanics, would probably be much more well regarded by the fan base. There are a good amount of different scenarios and endings in the game, and for what it sounds like, they offer up totally new story points and perspectives, so it's more than just a few swapped lines of dialogue or a different party member on the final boss. For example, remember the flower shop with that weird lady that hands us an item called Sophia's Seed? Well, it turns out, on the true neutral route, the flower shop employee is actually the Gnostic deity Sophia, who in Gnostic mythology was responsible for birthing Yaldabaoth. In that route, you learn more about her character, and the ending takes on a totally different tone. This is only 2 endings, and there are a lot more, so I suppose if it turned out that you really loved this game, well, you'd have a lot of replay value. Music is also great, like I said. Every song feels pretty fitting, and there aren't any that I can really say are bad. Some tracks, like the remix shop theme, are in my opinion on the higher end of music for this franchise. Of course, what's a game without its gameplay? This is where 9 suffers. The standard battle system feels disconnected. The RTS system has potential, but is often boring, and all around, the game's just easy. This, combined with the fact that you don't even really level up from fighting, makes combat feel almost as if it was like a second thought for the game. It honestly could have just been a visual novel with the amount of talking and cutscenes you have. I still think if they just focused on one battle system, the game would have been much better, or at least felt a bit more polished. There's no exploration either, with the dungeons and city feeling very bare bones and empty. Overall, I'd say it's a game with a lot of cool ideas, but not that much substance, at least gameplay wise. So should you play it? Honestly, I think any game you're interested in is worth playing, but if you don't have an Xbox capable of playing Japanese games, I'd definitely wait until the emulation's in a better state. If I had to rank this game on a tier list, I think at its very best it's a C-, but most of the time it's somewhere in the D range. I'd love to see more people talking about this game and learning more about the endings, especially considering there's a good bit of content in this game that you literally can't find online. If you're one of those crazy people that's already played it, please comment below, let me know what you think of the game. The fanbase could really use more discussion about this one, and I'd love to hear it. This has been the Shin Megami Tensei 9 experience. A long, strange adventure into a world seemingly forgotten even by the series creators. I hope you guys enjoyed this one because I had a great time working my way through it for you. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video.